Brad Hanson, hello.
Hi, mate. How's it going? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Here we are. Hello, Louise.
Happy Friday. We made it.
We made it. So this time we're purely going to be talking about short films, which is quite exciting, actually. Brad, I know you mentioned this on our first chat, that you don't watch a hell of a lot of short films, and I don't either, actually. And I don't know why I don't, because whenever I watch them, I kind of love them. Louise, are you a big fan of shorts? Do you get time to watch a lot of shorts?
I don't, unless they're put in front of me, like in this. And then I really love it, because you feel like in an hour, you can watch loads of tiny miniature horror films, which if they're really good, like this lot have been, it's just the best hour of tiny, mini, brilliant stories. So I love that about them.
Let's begin with a British one. This is an 11-minute film called The Thing That Ate the Birds. I'll quickly read the plot synopsis. On the North Yorkshire moors, Abel, head gamekeeper, discovers the thing that is eating his grouse. And that's all we'll say about it. Louise, what did you think of The Thing That Ate the Birds?
I loved The Thing That Ate the Birds. I thought it was really atmospheric. It was properly that kind of dripping with atmospheric dread. The only I find British horror does so well. It makes it so ordinary and therefore so terrifying. So I thought there was so much going for it. It was genuinely horrific and had some really crunchy sort of body horror in it too, which I really liked.
Really good. Brad, it's directed by Sophie Mayer and Dan Gisham. And I felt like they kind of created a bit of it felt like a folk horror, right? We talked about folk horror on day one. This feels a bit like a kind of classic folk horror.
Yeah, there's something always so eerily uncanny about rural and folk horror. There's something about those kind of dour landscapes and those dour buildings, you know, where you've passed by these sections of landscape across the country that we live in and not given it a second thought. And in examining kind of what goes on in those day-to-day lives as us three city folk, not so much you anymore, Mike, since you moved out to the sticks.
I'm a hillbilly now.
But yeah, like we always drive past these areas, but we never stop and look. And it's like a peek behind the curtains of like an existence that's not far removed from our own, but completely different. And I find it really fascinating. And The Thing That Ate the Birds itself is a genuinely quite terrifyingly grotesque creature played by James Swanton.
Yes, James Swanton, who we've already mentioned because he was in Broadcast Signal Intrusion. But yeah, friend of the pod, James Swanton, played sort of, we won't say too much, but he plays a kind of creature in this. And Louise, that creature's pretty fucking scary, right? I thought it was
really scary. Really scary, genuinely unpleasant and scary. And in a really kind of stark way that you don't, sometimes you're shown a monster and you immediately go, oh, you really shouldn't have shown me that. But actually, I think they're very clever about the way they do.
Yes, it's always good when they show a monster and it's not a letdown, right? And in this case, it really isn't. I loved it. So there you go. So that was The Thing That Ate the Birds. Let's move on to Don't Peek. So this is a 6-minute film from the US directed by Julian Terry. The plot synopsis: a young woman discovers a frightening video game character intent on crossing into the real world. Louise, I've got to start by asking you about this as the video game expert. Video game and horror, right? Your two favourite things. What did you think of Don't Peek?
It's the perfect Venn diagram with me in the middle. Like I was like,
did somebody make this for Louise?
Yeah, I was literally like, someone made this for me. Someone made me a nice 6-minute present. Yeah. I think the fact it's got Animal Crossing in it is really interesting because I spent 800 hours playing Animal Crossing last year, but I think everybody did that. So I think it's actually very current, and I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but it is a nightmare of playing a game and the worst thing that could possibly, it's kind of creepypasta style, the worst thing that could possibly happen when you were playing a game happens because you're meant to be safe, it's meant to be lovely, it's meant to be calming, especially Animal Crossing with fishing and catching bugs and doing all these nice things, designing a house, and that's not what happens in these 6 minutes. And I think it's a really, and in terms of its scares, it's very sort of lights out, very Conjuring, very jumpy. And I think it really works because I think that's really fun. And I think sort of mixing that up with everybody sitting playing their Switch. And I love even how she's lit. The girl playing, she's just lit by the screen of her Switch. And that's how we've all been for so long. So I think it works really, really well. It's so much fun.
Yeah, the kind of isolated quarantine theme will come up again and again, actually, in some of these shorts. But yeah, Brad, what did you think of Don't Peek?
So the things I've written on my notes here are oh, it's Animal Crossing. Louise will like this. And then, I wrote, turn off the game. And then it reminded me of that Rick and Morty bit where he says, Nintendo, give me free stuff. And,
yeah.
And then I've just written,
yes.
The reveal.
Yes. My notes were, oh, this is good. And then, shit. It's good, isn't it? It's like Lights Out is it's the Lights Out style horror film, right? Which is like short, sweet, and works towards a good scare, basically.
Yeah.
Well worth a watch. I loved it. So that is, Louise, you mentioned the other day, this is on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Yeah,
Amazing.
It's on YouTube. The director, Julian Terry, it's on his YouTube account. And I also tweeted about it earlier in the week as well. So
we'll tweet it and I'll link it in the little synopsis. So there you go. So that was Don't Peek. Let's move on to something a little bit different now. We're going on to a horror musical called Stuffed from the UK. This is a longer one. This is 19 minutes long, directed by Theo Rees. Stuffed is a short musical about a taxidermist who dreams of stuffing a human and the man she meets online. So afraid of aging, he volunteers to be her specimen. An unexpected romantic spark between them complicates their plans. Oh, Brad, what did you think of Stuffed?
I actually loved it.
I loved it.
Not a lot of people know this, but I'm a big musicals fan. I keep this under my hat with all the video nasties, but I love a musical. And so this is once again almost like a Venn diagram, like Louise talks about in the last one. It's, I like a musical, I like a banger, and I bloody like people getting taxidermied. So,
yeah. What I wasn't expecting, Louise, from a horror musical about a taxidermist is that I actually found it quite sweet and even a little bit, I got a little bit misty-eyed almost at one point, What did you think?
I found it really emotional. I found it really heart-wrenching, this idea of people looking for a connection amidst all the nastiness and the sort of just the murder of taxidermy. And I think there was a real sort of existential despair to it. The idea of aging. The person she has is obviously one of the reasons to be taxidermied would to not to age and to not suffer and to exist perpetually in a state of the state you are currently in. And I think there was a real sadness. And I want to say it, the music, just on an off note, it was very Sondheim-esque. It reminded me very much reminded me of Sweeney Todd, because there's kind of a difference between the singing of a script and a track. None of them, some of them actually might be standalone tracks that you could listen to, but they really felt like internal monologues set to music, and it was the most slightly stressful music as well. It wasn't exactly an easy listen. It was incredibly composed. So it was really crept under your skin. And also, saying it's 19 minutes, it felt like about 2. I could just watch it again and again. It was so good.
I could watch a feature version of this. I think, like I hope it happens. I thought it was great. I like probably all of us by the sounds of it. I love a musical as much as I love a horror, and I love that Venn diagram. I think they actually are genres that go together really well because they're kind of high emotion and they're raw and they complement each other. So yeah, I loved it. I thought the 2 performers did an amazing job as well. They were brilliant. So yeah. Loved it. So that was Stuffed, directed by Theo Rees. Hopefully that will be somewhere out there in the world for people to see at some point. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is a quick one, 6 minutes long, from the United States. It's called Joanne is Dead, directed by Brian Sacker. The plot synopsis: it's easy to dismiss the ramblings of the dementia-riddled elderly as nonsense. But what if there is a deadly truth behind those words? So, Louise, what did you think of Joanne is Dead?
I love Joanne is Dead simply because the people in it, the characters in it, were intentionally awful, despicable 21st century stereotypes of vocal fry and just in feeling and exactly that. Oh my god. It was I was so infuriated throughout it, and I think that's something that I think we've all kind of got our own ideas of elderly people that we know, and especially in the last year, elderly people have become, they're the ones that suffer the most from COVID, and I think there's a lot of thematic elements in terms of that, of dealing with your own thoughts on that. So I don't want to spoil any of it, but I thought it was a magnificent delivery at the end. I think I'll probably watch that again too.
So good. Yeah, respect your elders, right? Is basically the key here. Brad, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is dying. There's not a lot of dignity in dying in general, and we as a culture kind of dismiss and throw away our are elderly and lock them up and get rid of them because they're unseemly and they ramble and they don't talk, they don't contribute. And this is, you know, the punchline to this, shall we say, is such a cathartic experience to be like, fucking teach these whippersnappers a lesson.
Yeah.
And it made me think a lot about my nan before she passed, was rambling some absolutely insane and ludicrous things. And I'm thinking now, like,
maybe it wasn't so ludicrous.
Nan.
She's got some secrets. Yeah, there you go.
What have you been up to, babe? Come on.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it as well. I thought the characters were suitably despicable, so that it's kind of the film is quite nasty towards them at the end, and I loved that about it. Yeah, it was great. So good. So that is Joanne is dead. Let's move on to the next one, The Moogai. The Moogai. So this is a good one. This is a 15-minute long movie from Australia, directed by John Bell. It's an Aboriginal psychological horror. The Moogai is the story of a family terrorised by a child-stealing spirit. So a kind of baby-snatching monster here, haunting a couple. Louise, what did you think of The Moogai?
I think I text you quite near the end of this just saying fuck.
Yeah.
I found the Moogai really stressful, really intense, really good and scary. But one thing I really liked about it was I initially thought it was going to be about postnatal depression. And I thought, oh no, that's what this is. And I was so relieved when it wasn't that, because it kind of it made things equal. And I almost prefer the idea of a monster actually existing, and when her husband could see it too. And that to me was really refreshing, actually, that it wasn't some kind of, oh, it's all in your head. So I really enjoyed it, and I thought the monster was horrible, and I thought it was really, really, really effective.
Yes. Did you find this effective, Brad, The Moogai?
Yeah, I mean, without getting you can't really talk about The Moogai in terms of what it's saying without spoiling a lot about what the film is. But I think what it's using, I mean, you can say it's spiritually close to the Babadook, but I think it's doing something a lot more interesting. I think this is dealing with a wider and bigger societal issue that I find really fascinating, really interesting. And I think it firstly gives you characters that are developed enough in the short running time to care about, and then gives the affirmation that this isn't in their heads, as Louise says, and it's not some kind of, you know, women's psyche kind of thing that we've seen so many times over and over again, and that it's talking about something a lot larger and a lot more cultural and a lot more significant. And I think it's really important. I think it's really interesting, and I'd love to see it fleshed out into a feature.
I was talking on Patreon this week to a guest, Sarah Dobbs, who was saying, and she's so right, she was like, you know, yes, it's really interesting, this kind of trend of horror of the last few years. Yes, what if the real monster is grief? Yes, what if the real monster is depression? Yes, what if the real monster is aging or dementia? But she's like, what if now the real monster is just a werewolf? Like, what's happened to just monsters in films? And I think you're right. Like, I loved this movie because I think all of that's there still. Like you said, this movie is about more than just a monster, but also it is a monster. It's a baby snatching monster story as well, on a very surface level that you can really enjoy as like a scary short film, right? It's properly creepy, I think, as well.
There's some lingering images, so yes, absolutely.
That final shot is a bastard.
Oh,
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Loved it. Yeah, very, very good. I'd like to give it a second watch because I loved it that much. So that was really good. So that was The Moogai. Let's move on to our next, Significant Other. This was a weird one. 5-minute film from the United States, directed by Quinn George. A couple struggles to see eye to eye when a mysterious red orb appears in their home. Brad, what did you make of this one? This was a weird one.
I knew you'd fucking chuck this one at me and try and fucking explain this. So, without spoiling it, which I don't want to do, I see it as a possession metaphor for the worst parts of us taking over control.
Oh.
Now, I can't say why I can't. The beauty of this is I can't back that up because I'll be spoiling the film. So, but that is what I will say, is that the red orb for me represents the bad parts of you taking over and ruining relationships and ruining things.
That's interesting. I maybe need to give this a second watch, Louise, because I don't think I quite really got what this movie was doing. Although at its surface, right, it's a creepy corridor with a creepy red light. One character can see something that the other can't, essentially. But what did you make of it?
I think I didn't quite see thematically the same things as Brad, but I found it, again, what I find unsettling in a lot of horror films is putting things into ordinary situations, and the fact that someone is just having a conversation in a corridor with something that they can see and something they can't see, for instance, I think is, in only 5 minutes, it delivers a very unnerving, natural feeling horror that I felt had a really interesting tone. So I was constantly fascinated by it, even though if I wasn't quite sure where I was.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So that was Significant Other. Puss. Let's talk about Puss.
Yeah.
Puss is an 8-minute short from the United States, directed by Leah Shaw. Samantha desperately wants to get laid, but is finding it to be difficult for some reason. That's the official plot synopsis. I mean, the unofficial plot synopsis is horny woman in quarantine during COVID times, right? And madness ensues, basically. Louise, what did you think of Puss?
I can't talk about the reasons why I love Puss so much, because we really shouldn't. But I love the horror that's coming out of isolation and quarantine, and what it is like just to be super, super thirsty and try and flirt with the delivery driver. And so all of these things. It's so good and it's so accurate. And also I loved the strange designs in her flat. Like, there was just a table made of boobs. Did you see that? It was just bizarre. I love the fact there was just iconography everywhere for serious horn.
Yes, that's it. It was like everything imaginable was making this woman hornier, wasn't it? Brad, what did you think of Puss?
I mean, the last year's been difficult for all of us. I mean, not you, Mike. You've got a girlfriend you live with, you bastard. But for most people who are alone, the last year has been absolute chaos in terms of finding arousal in things that you're like, that's troubling.
There's something wrong with me. Why am I enjoying this so much?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of ingenious filmmaking that captures a mood of an entire generation, this is a pretty successful attempt at it.
It does it so well, like even with use of kind of stuff that might sound annoying, but like text coming up on screen. But everything they do is done really well, right, Louise? Like all of those little kind of filmic techniques that brings this kind of mood to life, I think, as well.
Yeah, it feels really snappy, really fast, really colourful, really bright, which is why it's all the more effective, because it's just so, everything is so clear. Nothing is in the shadows, shall we say? So it's wonderful.
Love it. So there you go. So that was Puss. Next up is Reclaw, 12-minute film from the United States, directed by Polaris Banks, and it also stars Lance Henriksen. So this movie was very weird. So the synopsis: a team of altruistic vigilantes destroy evidence to keep as many people from prison as possible, but when one of their crime scene cleanups is revisited by the killer, the strength of their convictions is tested. I mean, that pretty much gives away the entire plot there. So Brad,
Basically.
what did you think of this one?
I liked it. There's certainly a sheen to this film, an aesthetic sheen that makes it feel like there's some budget behind this, and it's got a bit of production value behind it. And obviously having fucking Lance Henriksen, the boy, in it, help. I wouldn't say it doesn't. It's not a massive help, but it's certainly great to see him involved in something that's kind of intimate and fun and small. And I kind of like this idea of vigilantism, like cleaning up crimes and kind of helping people avoid jail. But then it's like, where does that line stop? Like, who's allowed this luxury, shall we say, this luxury service? And we're hearing in the news, obviously daily, that there are crimes occurring. Would Reclaw work for things that have happened recently in real life? Yeah. Is it socially responsible for that to occur? Like, I don't understand. I don't really know why the film is doing it.
So there you go. So that was Reclaw. Next, let's move on to... How much are we going to have to say about this? Let's see. Let's move on to Flex. I think this might be the shortest film of the bunch. This is 4-minute long film from Sweden, directed by Josephine Malmen. A semi-surreal comedy short that literally lets you under the skin of a bodybuilder and his ambivalent self-image, exploring the fine line between self-loathing and self-loving. So you've got this incredibly burly man basically flexing his muscles and sort of looking incredibly vain, but then he's got this internal monologue going on where he kind of hates himself, right? That's sort of what I got from it. Brad, any thoughts on Flex that you want to voice?
Yeah, it's an absurd and but also quite interesting mini short. We'll call it a mini short because it's really, really short. But when you literally go under the skin, so to speak, link in bio to our chat for Under the Skin, then it kind of goes into these absurdist, surrealist viewpoint of a man's internalized thoughts. That's quite interesting and fun, but at the end of it, you're just like, I don't know what I gained out of that at all.
Yeah, Louise, what did you think of this one?
I didn't get anything out of it really at all. I just was. It was one of those experiences going, I'm really glad it's short because I don't really feel particularly intrigued or interested. I thought something that happened at one point was cute because things made interesting noises, and that was about as far as my thoughts on it went.
Well, there you go. We've talked probably for nearly longer than the running time of the film about it, so we've done well there to have anything to say about it. But that was Flex. So let's move on to the next movie. A Puff Before Dying, a 9-minute long American movie directed by Michael Reich and the Bob Baker Marionette Theatre, because this is a puppet show. A wild night of drugs and drugged up driving ends in tragedy for 3 teenage girls that happen to be marionettes. Louise, what did you think of A Puff Before Dying?
Is this genuinely for the Road Traffic Safety Association, or was that a joke?
I think it is. It comes up with a caption saying it's for the road traffic. It's basically like a road safety. It's like a don't drink and drive, but don't do drugs and drive video, right?
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
But with that as the message, because it's like, well, this is really a strong message. Don't get high and drive. That's not great. But I did love it. I thoroughly enjoyed everything about it. I loved the fact everyone was puppets. I loved even the imagery of painting puppet nails. That's one of my favorite things. Or the challenges of hugging as a puppet. I love all of that. So I found it ludicrously enjoyable, and I found the teenage girls to be brilliant. And I enjoyed the message, shall we say. I found the message enjoyable.
Yes, I agree. Brad, what did you think of this?
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
You don't like it?
I didn't like it. I didn't get anything out of it. Like, I was waiting for something to happen because once again, I hadn't read the synopsis or anything like that. And we see this thing and you think it's kind of almost setting up to like a teen slasher thing. Like when they're in the car and, oh my God, you gotta...
And it's got a kind of 80s synth vibe going on.
Yeah. And then it's a reveal effectively if you don't read the synopsis. Don't smoke and drive or whatever. Like, I thought that was common sense.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it made more sense at the end when it said it was for the road safety, whatever it was, because I kind of know what you mean, Brad. Like, I was expecting maybe some sort of twist or something to subvert what was going to happen, but it's like, oh, okay, they just drink and drive and get into an accident and that's it. And it's like, but because it's done with marionette puppets, it's quite entertaining, and I did really enjoy it. So there you go. So that was A Puff Before Dying. Let's move on to Flick. Interesting. Flick, a 10-minute American film directed by Ariel Zengotita. A reclusive college student is driven mad after picking a booger he can't flick away. Brad, what did you think of Flick?
I mean, as someone who's picked it, rolled it, flicked it, licked it, and done all sorts of... I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, I just want to conjure an image of me eating boogers at people.
Yeah, great.
It's fun. I mean, I kind of saw a lot of myself in him, to be honest, because I'm a very unmotivated man that wants to sit around and watch movies all day, and that's all I really want to do.
Yeah, I loved it, actually. I thought it was really fun. Do you know what it weirdly reminded me of? It was like Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead 2 sort of fighting his own hand or something. I felt like that's kind of what it was channeling, that sort of mania, right, of like one guy on his own. And it's like, in some ways, right, Louise, it's kind of like the opposite to Puss, where it's like, this is a man who doesn't want company. He's like choosing isolation and sort of being a recluse, isn't he? That's the thing. And it's an interesting kind of flip side, I suppose, to Puss in that way.
And fun and gory, sort of I could have done without the middle bit, but the goriness, yes, absolutely.
We love a bit of gloop.
Love a bit of gloop.
Yeah.
Love a bit of gloop. Yeah.
I love the fact he just doesn't learn either.
No,
Yeah,
not
it's
at all.
great. And the final shot really made me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
It was really good. Yeah. So there you go. So that was Flick. Let's move on to this one. Another strange one. A 5-minute Swedish short film called A Tale Best Forgotten, directed by Thomas Stark. In a house by a river that lamented as it ran, lived a father and his daughter and the dog-headed man. That's the synopsis. That's pretty much the whole plot.
That's the dialogue.
That's the dialogue. That's the script. That's the plot. That's everything. Louise, any thoughts on A Tale Best Forgotten? What did you think?
So I thought it was shot beautifully, and I loved the idea of it being a complete translation of a poem as it went through a series of reflections. What I found actually quite challenging was in the credits there were more characters than I thought there were.
Yeah,
and
I thought that.
And I had to watch it again, and I'm not entirely sure where the additional characters are and who was meant to do what they did. Which isn't, I don't suppose that's a very good review, but I found it very atmospheric and cool when I thought it had run one way and it actually might have been another.
There seems to be 4 characters in it, and what I got maybe, because I watched it twice too, is that we're seeing a pair of characters and then we're going backwards into the past to see something happen to another set of characters, I think.
Okay.
Right. Brad, any thoughts on this weird little short?
It's definitely very avant-garde with its presentation. And I love its kind of like seemingly disorientating one circular take.
Yeah,
it's almost going through like a perpetual cycle of, once again, potentially time as well. Like this is the dog-headed man is always a prevalent factor in this, but the other 2 sets could continue go on. I found it quite Noé-esque.
The camera work.
In its camera work.
Yeah.
But I really loved it. Like for a 5-minute film, I think it perfectly captures the atmosphere and tone of that quite rudimentary lines of poem, but read in such a creepily evocative way with that kind of crackingly witchy-esque voice. There's sort of a folk horror inflection to it as well, definitely.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was like, I could have that on as a party as like a continual loop, just fucking with people's heads.
It is. It is literally, I suppose, what it says. It's a poem. It's a visual poem, basically, isn't it? It's a little visual verse. And I really liked it too. I thought it was really, really hypnotic and looked beautiful. And had to watch it twice because I kind of felt the first time I didn't really get it. It was quite a joy to watch a couple of times. So there you go. So that was A Tale Best Forgotten. And last but not least, then, the final short we're going to talk about is Run That Shit, a 14-minute American short directed by Tristan Kim. A satanic cult lures a no-name rapper into stealing an enchanted chamber pot from his estranged friend and now superstar rapper Big Tobacco. Brad, any thoughts on Run That Shit?
Run That Shit feels very akin in almost, I'm going to use a parlance here, a southern fried greasy strangler.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's got the kind of Georgia set of tones. I mean, I'm not saying it goes to the bizarre depths of lunacy that Greasy Strangler does, but they certainly feel like quite similar bedfellows.
Yes.
In terms of this is a realm or a place that doesn't abide by the laws of logic, and it's a fun, silly, if ultimately empty, little tale of a bloke going to try and steal an enchanted chamber pot, basically.
Yeah, we've moved on from boogers to poo now, Louise. What did you think of this film?
The switch, that's the problem. Like, anytime anything is about poo, it tends to make me retch. So there was a sequence in it that actually halfway through made me feel really unwell.
Yeah.
I didn't really, it is empty. I didn't quite get it. I was kind of intrigued at points by these sort of rabid satanic people in jumpsuits that were trying to find enchanted chamber pots full of shit. I didn't. Initially, I felt like I was in, and then I was just confused, and it was fine. But I found it quite gross.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I think this might be my least favourite. It felt, I don't know, it just felt a bit juvenile to me. Like, it felt like a little bit like a film that was like written by a 12-year-old. It's like, yeah, poo jokes and then ninjas and gangsters and like, I don't know. I didn't really get what it was doing or where it was going at any given moment. So there you go. That's all of the shorts. We rattled through them. I'm going to ask you both before we finish a favourite. What was your number one pick of that list of 13 shorts? Louise, what was your fave?
Okay, well, Don't Peek was made for me, so that's not fair that I put it on my top pick list. So that goes very high. But I think Stuffed. I think that's...
You're going for the musical. Yeah, that's a good one. Brad, what about you?
Mine would be a tie between Don't Peek and A Tale Best Forgotten.
Very good, yeah. I think mine would be a tie between Stuffed and the Moogai. Well, guys, until tomorrow, thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Looking for more horror content? Subscribe now for more videos like this one and listen to the Evolution of Horror podcast. Head on over to evolutionofhorror.com.